Breaking news!
Good morning, colonists. This is one of the two anchors, Skylar. Today, September 5th, 1774, marks the first day of the Continental Congress being held.
Hi, colonists. This is your second news anchor, Kayla here. We know that today is an important one, as Skylar mentioned, but there's also some chaos going on in the colonies, specifically in Massachusetts. There is breaking news on a protest about Britain's enforcement of the Intolerable Acts. Our reporter, Anthony, is on site interviewing a colonist involved in this protest. Anthony, what information can you tell us?
Thanks, Kayla. I'm currently on the scene of interest where we have an angered merchant here in Boston, Massachusetts, who has some interesting thoughts about these intolerable acts. Jax, can you fill us in on what the motives of your protests are today?
Sure can do. I would like to express that Britain clearly shows no interest in property government governing the colonists. We need to know that they walked all over us, and the cruelty is not justified. Ever since the end of the French and Indian War, the laws have been directly imposed to punish us, directly. I can't go on to this tavern without hearing everybody complain about England's policies.
Wow, we can clearly see that everyone is angered by these intolerable acts. I think it is time to fill our audience in on what is causing all of this conflict.
What are these intolerable acts forcing upon the colonists that are making them so angry?
Good question, Skylar. Well, there are 4 significant acts that are now being engraved into colonial society. However, against the colonists' will, it is important to address why this is all occurring and what is behind the enforcement of all of these acts. Simply enough, following Britain's attempt to restore financial stability after the recent French and Indian War, many taxes were introduced. For example, we have the Stamp Act, Sugar Act, Tea Act, and so much more. Us colonists have executed our retaliation in many ways. We all know of the Boston Tea Party.
Yes, that event is surely going to mark history. Britain had to face a huge expense with all of that vandalized property and loss of tea.
I can agree with you on that, and to put that into current context, the Boston Tea Party has already done so. All of these intolerable acts were in direct response to Britain's irritation with those involved, taking it out on the entire body of rebellious colonists as a whole. We see this with the corresponding Boston Port Act, which removed access to these ports until the colonists agreed to fund the restoration.
Hold that thought. It looks like our protester has something to say on this.
Great! Anthony, what can you get for us?
Well, let's have Jack give his perspective on the Boston Port Act. How did the act affect your business?
I am beyond angry that the British Navy has limited the other colonists' access to our ports. How else are we supposed to trade our goods? Boston has been a major port city player and a crucial role in the triangle trade. My business is suffering. Of course, it is going to take a while to pay all the money, and the British reopen the ports.
And with that, let's have Kayla continue with the next few acts that we colonists have faced with right now.
Thanks, Anthony. Following this comes the Massachusetts Government Act. We see this colony really getting hit hard all the way from Britain. Not only has their charter been revoked, but their council is no longer independent of British influence. We see that the Crown is now who appoints members of the council. That is a big loss. Now we have the Administration of Justice Act, where it is now illegal to prosecute Massachusetts British officials. With this, who knows what lengths they will go to as they enforce these regulations.
Given that their capital offenses are basically discarded and they will not be tried, I am not sure that this is going to be good for us.
No, we are now touching on what is, in my opinion, one of the most punishing acts, the Quartering Act.
Jack, how do you feel about housing and providing for these recruited British troops because of this act?
Not very great. It is complete and utterly invasion of privacy. I am infuriated that I cannot have the peace in my own home. It's one thing that these troops are swarming in Massachusetts, it's another they require the colonists to reluctantly give them the space to live.
I have to agree with you there. Let's go back to our news anchors. Thank you. I felt it is also important to mention that just a few months ago in July, the Quebec Act resulted in our colonial territory to now lack land between the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. This took a toll on trade with Native Americans. It's a shame. All of what we have said about the Intolerable Acts leads us up to today. I know that Skylar can fill us in on that.
The First Continental Congress, all started by 12 men from the 13 colonies, all meeting up in Philadelphia to determine a response to the Intolerable Acts. These delegates wanted to create a new nation, but some of them wanted to create a colonial representative so they could communicate with the king. The delegates decided to take a cautious approach, and the bodies of the delegates represented the angered colonists. Then they sent a petition to King George III so that they could attempt for him to repel the acts. But they never received a reply. Following that, they issued a Declaration of Rights which showed that they were still loyal to the British crown.
Let's address today's meeting called the Continental Congress, which took place in Philadelphia earlier today. They seem to be taking direct action against the Intolerable Acts that have taken its toll on business across the colonies.
On the scene, Sean is currently interviewing one of the delegates from Virginia.
Thanks, Scholar. Here we have General George Washington, a delegate and military general from Virginia, who met in the Continental Congress at Carpenter's Hall. Mr. Washington, what is the purpose of today's meeting?
This Continental Congress is meant to oppose the coercive acts that have been deemed intolerable by people in every British colony. It is clear that these acts were a direct punishment on every colonist who opposed previous laws imposed by the British government, and especially on the people who participated in the Boston Tea Party.
What did you and the other delegates accomplish in today's meeting?
We have decided to boycott British goods. This includes paper from the Stamp Act and tea from the Tea Act due to the current taxes imposed on importing and exporting. Knowing the effect it would have on mainland Britain's economy, we have sent a petition to the King regarding the Intolerable Acts.
Thank you for the information, Mr. Washington. Back to you.
We have just been notified that the Continental Congress created a Declaration of Rights for colonists.
Sham appears to have more information regarding this document.
That is correct, Kayla. General Washington, on what basis has the Congress created the Declaration of Rights?
The Declaration's idea is to reaffirm colonists' desire for religion, laws, and overall liberties to be preserved. This idea aligns with the laws of nature and the rights of Englishmen.
You told us earlier that the delegates have decided to boycott British goods. Do you have any additional information regarding this? Also, when will the Congress be meeting again?
The Congress has come to an agreement that we will pass the Articles of Association, which will halt the importation of British goods starting on December this year of 1774. Of course, this is if England does not repeal the coercive acts. If Britain refuses to repeal the acts that have been destroying colonists' lives, then we will be reconvening on May 10th, 1775.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. Back to you in Boston.
Thanks, Anthony. This Continental Congress is trying to create a representative body so that colonists and their needs can be communicated with the King.
I agree. However, one must worry about losing the connection between the Congress and the appointed governors and King if policies push too far.
We will keep you all updated once the King responds to the petition sent by Congress, and hopefully things don't continue to get chaotic.